We are live.
All right.
What's been going on with you, man? How you doing today?
Good, man. Good. Just excited to get back in the saddle and speak on what we got topic today, management agreement.
Yeah, we're going to talk about management agreements today.
Yeah, break down management agreements. Might get into a little bit of current affairs. You never know what we might do here, but we're always going to drop knowledge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we want to thank you guys for listening to Buy the Block with Bryan Chavis. This is the podcast where we teach you how to buy it, rent it at profit, how to master multifamily. And we want to thank our sponsors, Bryan Chavis Coaching and Consulting, as well as the Multifamily Matrix, Rent-A-Meter Pro, and Allison's Alligator. Thank you. And Home Depot Pro for sponsoring the podcast. And today we do have a great segment for you. This is all about the management agreements, a very important part of laying the foundation of managing your properties. Mm-hmm. So you're going to want to stay tuned. And so why don't we go ahead and get into that today, B? So most management agreements are entered into with, kind of both parties looking to establish a good long-term relationship, right?
Right.
So people are feeling good.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody's feeling good. Yeah.
Right. But then all of a sudden things start to
things can happen, and we don't want to preface the show with as if this is something the bearer of bad news, the management agreement. It's a great thing. It's
absolutely
it's a necessary agreement and contract.
Yeah.
But what happens is often, there's owners and operators, owners and managers sometimes don't see eye to eye, often do not see eye to eye. And so what happens? You have to then resort back to what the agreement says.
Correct.
What's the contract say. That's what an attorney is going to say, or a judge is going to say. What does the agreement say? So what is put in the agreement is really important. And I think for our listeners, and it was evident in our lecture the other week, that most owner and operators feel that they have little to no control over this process.
Got it.
It's like the management company will hand or present a agreement or contract, and you sign it. But as I was explaining that, no, you have as an owner and operator, for me, when working with a third party contractor, I'm handing you a template of an agreement and saying, hey, listen, I know you have your agreement. I have here are the major components, if not a template or agreement myself. And we have to make sure that what's in this agreement that I'm handing you is in the final agreement.
Right.
And I can look at what you're about to present, and we can bring the two together and make a hybrid form. And that's what often happens with me. And then we can move forward. But I would probably say, as long as I've been doing this, 99.7% of the time, that's the way it goes down.
Right.
It was only a few times that I've ever allowed someone to hand me an agreement and say, hey, look, this is how we manage your property.
Yeah.
And I signed it over. Because as owner and operator, I kind of want to make sure I set the tone and dictate. And it's the same thing when I sign that agreement. I'm also in that contract, in that agreement, it spells out how I prefer the operations to be run.
Right.
And if you say, hey, well, this is how we run the operations, as long as they line up with the management plan, then I'm okay with it. But if you are not presenting a management plan or saying, hey, look, this is what we're going to do, then that's what I've done for you. Right. I basically have handed you a management plan and say, hey, look, this is our recommendations on how we want to see this property run based on our management plan, because our management plan is a relative of our underwriting.
Correct.
And a close relative to our waterfall structure, which means this is how we get paid. So if we're not executing on the management side, right, at the operational level, we're not following the management plan, then operations day to day are not going to coincide with the press and the returns that we've promised. And so that's when you begin to have all these issues. So that's why in the beginning, it's really important to understand, what a management plan is, what goes into a management plan. So you have a say-so in this.
I love it. So I'm going to take you through some of your coaching material that you have inside of the Multifamily Matrix and also in part of your one-on-one coaching. If you guys are interested in learning more about this, so we're going to go over this at a surface level, but if you want to deep dive into this, you can visit bryanchavis.com or you can visit multifamilymatrix.com/education to learn more about how you can, get involved with our training programs and learn more about actually developing a management agreement. So in your training material, you said, a well thought out, negotiated, written management agreement actually provides a checklist of items that have been agreed to in establishing the relationship between the real estate management firm and the property management owner. And so I want to take you through some of these and explain to me, why is this important? So the management company's concerns, you said there's kind of three primary concerns regarding the management agreement. The first one is for payment of services it renders. What does that mean?
Yeah. How do we get paid? So and again, that is, how do we get paid? And then, you move on, but you can get so granular.
Absolutely. We're going to do that.
How do you get paid?
Yep.
How do you get paid on the renewals? How do you get paid on the commissions? How do you get paid if there's an emergency? Right. Is there a fund? Is there an account that you can tap into to handle and take care of emergencies?
Okay.
Let's say something happens and a pipe burst.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no monies in the account, in the reserves to take care of that.
Right.
And the management company puts their credit card down and pays and looks to get reimbursed, but then never gets reimbursed or fights tooth and nail,
right?
For that income, right? Does the management agreement specify to the ownership that, hey, wait a minute, when the rent money comes in, we are to be able to pay that credit card balance as a regular vendor,
right?
And then take our management fee out. And then hand you the difference.
Got it.
And I've had to do battle with that personally before.
Really?
I was doing a consulting job for a large bank.
Okay.
They sent me into one of the worst neighborhoods you possibly enter into.
Yeah.
To take a property back because the owner basically left them with the note high and dry.
Yep.
Left the country. Now they had this asset. They're not in the management. Right. They don't know anything about on-site operations. They're a bank.
Right.
They find me, right? Hire me, go in, fix everything, stabilize it, get it ready for, here's what an appraisal looks like, get it close to this and we'll sell it and dump it. And I had to, find out that the banks, this particular bank was cheap, and when there was things needed to be taken care of, cameras needed to be working, so I had to get some things done. I wanted some cameras done in the parking lot for our safety. They agreed upon this.
Okay.
I forgot what had actually took place, but something needed to be done where the cameras went down.
Right.
For the individuals to come out, there was a dollar amount. The reserves, I asked for reserves. Reserves weren't given to me at this time. It had to go up and get approved by this person. You know what I mean? So I'm down. I'm on site handling, day-to-day operations while they're trying to get certain things approved. So I'm like, okay, go get it approved. And, but right now I'm gonna go to work, roll my sleeves back and go, roll my sleeves up and go to work. So budget wasn't approved for my reserves. Yeah. So I swiped the card and paid for these items myself. And I can remember it being an issue with one of the bank higher ups. Wait a minute, what is this $1,700? And why was this subtracted out of the operating income, out of our check, or deducted?
Right.
He's not supposed to take any deductions. He's supposed to collect the rent, give it to us.
Right.
Give us the rent money, and then we pay him his consulting and management fees. But they didn't read the fine print in that management agreement. It said, hey, listen, if there's any fees, if I feel like I need to be reimbursed and I have the receipts, and I provide you with documentation, that I need to be paid first, and then the money gets sent to you. So that language was in the management agreement. It might have been in the smaller fine prints, but it was in there.
It was in there, yeah.
So it's just, there's a lot of little things like that. So that would have never come up,
right?
Or I would have been basically been beaten out of that money. $1,700, $1,800, whatever. But for a lot of small operators, you know, and this is from the management side,
right?
You know, not the ownership side. And most of the time, I'm coming from the ownership side. But you know, there's arguments to be made on both sides. You know, to where, you know, as the owner, the management company was doing something that wasn't in alignment with what basically how we wanted the property ran or maintained. And, you know, we wanted to possibly make a change within the management companies, you know, because of these issues. So there's always, I've had the luxury of being on both sides of the fence, and I can tell you, being on both sides of the fence, that there's always issues.
It's great. It's interesting that you say that inside of your coaching program. It does mention that by setting the management agreement, you actually do get to understand the owner's philosophies on how they want the property to be managed. It might be a little more philanthropic, or they're low income housing. They're trying to provide a certain type of experience, and so by understanding what their goals are,
and that's why we teach, Nathan, our operators. Yeah. For those in the matrix that are owner operators, some are just strictly operators, management companies. Why we teach them to do an intake and an owner interview, so you can understand and ask, do they have a management plan? And if they don't work a management plan, a good property management company will say, okay, well, if you don't have a management plan, Nathan, for this particular project, let's work together to create a junior management plan so we can get on the same page. Right. And then you work with the ownership to create a management plan. You can do a junior management plan, which is less in depth, and then work towards a more in-depth one. 3 to 6 months after you've kind of been on site and kind of, understand the operations, you can get more in depth, or just make critical changes to the current junior, management plan, and it becomes a senior management plan after a while, but at the end of the day, it's really just important to understand what those objectives are. And it's kind of hard to do that if the management companies are not prepared to create management plans, because a lot of this, rules of engagement, i.e. the contract, really will, a lot of it is based upon, really the reason why certain things are laid out in the management agreement is because the management plan reads a certain way. Right. So
that makes sense. So let's get into one of the second kind of overall foundations of the management plan or agreement, which is risk reduction. So the second concern of real estate management firms is their potential liability for others' actions. Would love for you to break that down.
Yeah, that is, probably a lot more simple. Yeah. It's just trying to give an example, just making sure that you're covered as an owner. Yeah. Making sure that the actions of the management company are not necessarily viewed as the actions of the ownership. Got it. So we all want and hope that when we enter into a management agreement, that the property management company is going to do everything correctly. But there are instances, I was just speaking to you about one, privately, before we got on air, about a management company doing something wrong. And often they do. Right. How is that a reflection of the ownership? Because typically when there's a creditor, lurking, right, and someone sues, they're going to sue both the ownership and the management company. And the ownership has to be able to have some sort of documentation where they say, hey, listen, day-to-day operations, we weren't involved. Right. That's why we hired this professional management company. Yeah. So if they did something wrong, they did it without us understanding or us having knowledge of. Right. You should go after them. They're handling day-to-day operations. We do not condone this type of behavior, whatever it may be. There's levels of risk there. I mean, we can go further into risk. Of course. And then on the other side, as an owner or a management company, you can have an owner who's not on the up and up and want to violate and there's levels of risk that the owner can expose the management company to, violating fair housing laws, trying to pick and choose individuals that they want to put in the rental unit. I can talk, to you about 100 different things, crazy things. I don't know if you remember, a project we had, Nate.
Which one?
I'm gonna tell you. And we had one of the owners. I'm trying to tell a story without saying the name.
Of course.
That's why I'm going slow. And remember, he tried to get the girl's number and take her out and do more things.
Yes.
For compensation of rent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Circumventing us.
Correct.
So she owed money.
Yeah.
And we were trying to collect, and we were doing everything right as the management company.
Right.
And then we go to collect and have a conversation with the tenant, and the tenant's like, well, the owner came by and tried to cut a deal with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what did he try to do? Well, he said if I went out on a date with him and I wore this dress and this and that, and it sounds so crazy
it
and
sound crazy.
Off like it sounds no way. Until she pulled a text message out with his number, his phone, and screenshots.
Yep.
And verbatim, everything she said was
course.
In a text message. And you remember I had to have a conversation with that owner.
Yep.
So there's times where the owner can expose you as a management company to risk. So it's just, understanding that, there's risk involved for both parties, identifying the various amounts of risk. And I can probably take this whole entire episode, 2 or 3 more episodes,
right,
and fill them up with, examples. But you have to just take my word for it that there's a tremendous amount of risk on both sides.
Absolutely.
And so the risk to a certain extent or to a full extent, to your knowledge base, needs to be addressed. And how do you address it? You do that in the management agreement.
That makes sense. And thank you for breaking that down. And that story was crazy.
Right, you remember?
I do remember. Yeah.
But see how it resonates? It's like, okay, I wasn't even thinking about that risk. That was risk. That was a huge form of risk.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, so this is the primary concern is operational issues. Not primary, it's one of the top 3. So operational issues. In your training, you said a primary operational concern is whether the property owner has or will make available sufficient funds to operate the property. How does that come into play in your experience? Whether the owner has certain goals, but they don't even have the funds to execute operationally, or how do you protect yourself in that situation?
Yeah, and the key is. You don't protect yourself. You got to ask up front, have you established the reserves?
Got it.
And then you have to look at it. And this is why every management company, now wearing a hat of a manager, okay? Every management company should, look at a client and interview them. Mm-hmm. Most management companies are used to being interviewed by the ownership. The management company themselves, you remember, all the many years of giving lectures down in Miami at the Real Estate Association to the realtors. I was a stickler on making sure that they interviewed the owners. So you want to understand, interview the owners. You want to get as much detailed information about the property as you can. That's why I always say create a junior management plan. Get some basic financials, on the property, and before you enter into a management agreement, establish, some sort of reserves account to be able to handle. Now, if you don't do these things and you really want the management and the opportunity to manage this particular property for whatever reason, there could be a ton of reasons, all valid. You might want to build a relationship with this particular owner, right? He's buying more properties. He might be over leveraged, and cash poor, but you still want it because he's buying up all these properties, and and you're actually in position as a broker to list and sell these, right?
Right.
So there might be some alternative motives, but operationally, when you manage the properties Monday through Sunday, there's some deficiencies that there's not enough income, that he can't put reserves in place because he doesn't have the cash. So what do you do? I mean, what do you do?
Right.
I mean, that's up to the management company. Typically, you want to look at the situation. If you feel like you can float some of this yourself, then, you float it until you can get the rents up, and then, figure out a way to pay some sort of payback period or not payback period, but some sort of payback agreement, where, hey, listen, if I'm spending $1,700-$1,800 a month in credit card statements, buying, maintenance items for the property, common area items, I intend to be reimbursed maybe out of the cash flows.
Right.
When they get to a certain point. Because right now in the beginning, sometimes it probably may not be stabilized. So there may not be enough cash flows.
Right.
So you may be floating. So, and I've seen many creative things happen during this process where an owner or a management company say, hey, look, give me an level of ownership. Give me a percentage of ownership. I'll take a percentage of ownership.
Right.
And or they work something out on the back end to where when the rents get increased, whatever monies they put in to help with the operations. You've seen a ton of stuff. And then people say, well, why would any management company do that? Well, it really depends. I've seen it. It depends because, how much of a relationship the management company wants with this particular ownership. And they just may be cash poor right now as they're starting out. There's a million reasons. But the idea is that you just want to make sure that you understand the financial position that the ownership is in, as well as how the management company is owned and operated, who has the power, who is the true general partner, or sponsor, or the managing member in that particular LLC, who has the power. That's who you always want to make sure as the management company you're talking to, the individual that actually is, that has the say so. And then that's who you want to talk to, and that's who you want to try to work these differences out when it comes to the property's cash flows and abilities to maintain or handle reserves.
Absolutely.
And of course you don't want to back yourself into, you want to make sure you have this in writing if you're paying, because, paying for this maintenance, again, you're basically floating. Right. You're almost really, and to a certain extent, a partner. Right.
I have an example from my own experience. So I run a digital marketing agency, and
Allison's
Alligator. I was working with a large client. They had me run a specific type of like sweepstakes campaign. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to the company, set everything up, started paying for the service, and the company was slow to pay me to reimburse me for the service. I did not continue paying for the service. And so the company came after me and started trying to sue my personal business, where I had to go back and actually, so without dialing in the proper agreement, it really soured the relationship. And eventually they paid for everything, but, it just had me in a bit of a bind. Mm-hmm. And so, it's really important to dial these things in, because the relationship was friendly. We were both excited to work together, but then,
yeah, you want the business.
Yeah, why should I, now I'm facing a lawsuit. And these are the types of things that can happen with well-meaning relationships. Mm-hmm. So it's extremely
and often
important.
do.
Yeah.
And often do.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
That's a great point.
For breaking this all down, B. I mean, this is only just the tip of the iceberg when I look at all the material that you have developed on this. So I want to talk more about we'll wrap this up, but property owners' concerns within the agreement. What are some of the typical concerns that you see from property owners? I mean, being an owner yourself, and then also working with other owners, what are some of their concerns that typically their goals and concerns that get worked into an agreement?
That's a great question. I'll answer that in two parts.
Okay.
Part one is the uneducated investor, which I would say 85%.
Right.
Will just sign any agreement that the management company has. Yep. So they really don't know.
Yep.
Then you got the 20%, like where I was trained, some of the elite in the multifamily industry, that dictate through the management plan, mm-hmm. and through, their own agreement or template,
right,
and then go to the management company and say, hey, yeah, we'd love to work with you. You're elite. You're one of the best out there, but for this particular property, it must meet a certain criteria. It must make a certain return. And to ensure that, we have devised a management plan.
Okay.
And this management plan is accompanied with a template agreement to lock in that the operator, to ensure that the operator does the right things that coincide with the management plan.
Okay.
That pump the operations into the property. Right. So it's our only way to guarantee some sort of success.
Got it.
And most don't do that. 85, 90%. of operators. Well, let's just get to it. Let's get on down to the get down. Let's do it. Get down. So ask yourself, if you're listening to this podcast, ask yourself, how many times has an expert, guru, mentor, coach, consultant, client, ask yourself, how many times have they ever heard of the ownership doing what I just said? Handing a template of a management agreement plus the management plan to the property manager before, as an owner, before, before entering into an agreement, and or a property management company handing over a junior management plan after doing an interview with the owner, saying, hey, listen, we've devised this management plan based on what it sounded like you needed, and we've come up with this management plan. So if you both in a I've never seen this happen, but in a real world, in a alternate universe, you would have the management company and the ownership both having a management plan, and maybe possibly bringing them both together, and they merge them, a management agreement and template, management agreement or contents of it coming together, creating a solid relationship in a perfect world. It's not a perfect world. So, if you're a management company and you're listening to our podcast, then you're wanting to do, then you're wanting to figure out how to do intakes. Right. So, I'll end this segment with this. If you're a management company and you want to know how to excel in this business, then you'll learn how to do an intake. Onboarding interview or an intake interview. You will interview your potential owners before taking them on as clients. And then if you decide to take them on, the next step won't be a management agreement, would be creating a junior management plan based on the information in your intake. So your intake should be a meeting about their concerns and their goals of the property, basically asking them, extracting from them, if they have a management plan, all that information out. Then you would create a junior management plan based on that. And then you would create from scratch, from a template, a management agreement that coincides with that management plan, to a vast, cause there's stuff in the management plan that is template set, but then there's specifics in there that would be, based upon how you want the property run. That is how a management company should approach. As an owner, you should obviously during your underwriting be looking to create, as you're underwriting the property, the management plan. And as you're creating the management plan, when you're shopping and looking for third-party property managers, if that's what you do, we do everything in-house. But if you do have third-party property management company, then you're also then creating your management agreement along after you've gotten the basics, of the framework of your management agreement put in place. Then you're also working on the framework of your management plan. Your management agreement, to be able to hand to that property management company, and then in hopes of merging, the two together, their contract, your contract, and coming up with a contract that's a hybrid form of the both that is, suitable and pertains to that particular property. Because every property, Nathan, has its own DNA. Yeah. Separate from other properties. Exactly. I don't care what you have or who you have. Properties are different. So, it's you can have properties. You can have properties located, in the same block, same corner. Yeah. They're going to operate slightly different from zip code to zip code. So, that needs to be reflected in these agreements.
Absolutely. Especially, if you already see here, if you have different owners for different properties, there's different budgets and different, things that you can do.
Absolutely.
Thank
different qualifying criteria, different rules and regulations.
Absolutely. So, oh man, this was a doozy. Thank you so much for breaking this all down, B. And
absolutely.
Yeah, man. So if you guys want to learn more about putting together management agreements, we have some great templates within the Multifamily Matrix. So the Multifamily Matrix is our training system for investors, property managers, real estate consultants. It is the premier place. We meet every single week and provide you with all the training and resources, as well as all the tools you need to grow and succeed. So we would love to invite you to check us out, multifamilymatrix.com/education. You can see all of our curriculum laid out, and visit bryanchavis.com. Bryan Chavis, you can set up consultations to speak with him one-on-one, talk to him about some of his one-on-one coaching if you want to take it to that next level. And
we got a great program too. That
excellent program,
brand new coaching program, brand new platform. Excited about the launch of that, and you probably be looking for some tutorial videos coming out
absolutely
in the next couple of weeks that kind of shows everyone what goes on in the one-on-one, as well as the consulting programs that we have. So really excited about that and how it all meshes together, even inside the multifamily matrix. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, if you're looking to acquire a property in the next 12, 24 months, you're looking at some deals. The one-on-one coaching program is something I would definitely recommend. It's just great value. You're going to have a whole team to work alongside with, including Bryan Chavis and his expert team to help you manage that property in the best way.
Yep.
So, B, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you.
Oh, man, this was great. And look forward to speaking with you next week, brother.
See you next week.
Take care.
All right.